Hello and welcome. This is Introduction to Meditation. We are in week 11. Thank you very much for joining. There's just a couple of weeks left. And one of the downsides of this online video thing is I don't really get to see I don't really get to see you. And I don't really get the opportunity to get questions, try and find out what's bugging you, what's worrying you, questions about your meditation practice, questions about whatever. But there is the live chat option somewhere on your screen, on the YouTube thing. And Reed, otherwise known as Mr. Spin Paint, is online and is a much better resource for answering questions than I am, I can assure you. So please do take advantage of that. So this is week 11. We're going to look at the somewhat interesting history of meditation and performance, and that's performance in many different ways. We're going to go talk, yes, we'll talk about NBA finals and basketball and sports, but we'll also talk about the boardroom and at work, but it's also about your life. And we'll even throw in an embarrassing story from from my sex life. So we'll throw in one of those as well. But in the meantime, let's, before we get to all of that, let's start with a meditation. So if you can, just drop everything I've just said out of your mind and take your seat such that you're comfortable but not too comfortable, and take a nice deep breath in, all the way in, completely filling your lungs. And then let it all the way out. And once again, take a nice deep breath in, but this time hold it at the top for a moment. And then let it out very slowly, almost as slowly as you can, still breathing out, but only just. And when you get to the bottom of that breath, another nice deep breath in. And once again, let it out very slowly. As you're breathing out, just allowing your body to release any tension you're holding. And when you get to the bottom of that breath, just allow your breathing to return to normal. And in this moment, just noticing what you're bringing to the meditation class tonight. What's on your mind? What are the big pressures, big concerns, frustrations, anxieties, worries? Just noticing that all that stuff may be present for you right now. Just becoming aware of all that tension, and then seeing if you can just give yourself permission to take a break from that for 90 minutes. At the end of the class, you can have all that stuff back, but hopefully with a little bit more clarity, a little bit more peace, a little bit more calm to be able to deal with it. So now settling on your breathing, allowing everything else to fall away. Just bringing your full attention to each breath. Your mind is probably already trying to go elsewhere. Thinking about tonight or your life or whatever, but see if you can just notice that. Notice that the mind is perhaps agitated. And don't fight it, just notice it. But keep returning your attention back to this breath. Finding that calm behind the mind, just as we rest in awareness of the breath. It may help to really focus closely on one specific sensation, just where the air enters your nostrils or on your lips. Really looking closely at that sensation, more closely than you've ever looked at it before, noticing what makes up that sensation. Just holding your attention there. And of course your mind is going to take you elsewhere many, many times in the next 10 minutes, but each time you notice it, see if you can avoid judging yourself or getting frustrated, and just notice that it happened, that it's happening to everybody who's watching this right now. It's happening to me. And each time you notice it, just starting again, going back to the breath and starting again. We'll do this for about 10 minutes. for about halfway. Just remind you to be very gentle with yourself when you notice your mind is not focused exclusively on the breath. That's always going to be the case. I mean, sometimes it'll be more calm than others, but no matter how many times your mind strays or how long it's strayed for, just keep making that gentle effort to keep coming back to the breath over and over. And take a deep breath in and let it all the way out. Just expanding the area of your attention to notice the physical sensations in your body right now. Noticing the obvious ones, such as probably what you're sitting on. But also noticing the myriad of subtle ones. Hundreds of tiny little sensations from all over your body. The tips of your toes, tips of your fingers, all the way up your body to the top of your head. Resting your attention in the awareness of all these little sensations that are only happening right now. And take another deep breath in. And let it all the way out. And when you're ready, open your eyes and connect yourself back into your room. So welcome, week 11. It's been a long time since we started this journey. Thank you very much for being with me on it. So week 11, I wanted to look at this. Well, in the second half, I've been looking at how meditation is relevant and applies to real life. It's not just about sitting on a cushion or in a chair once a day or twice a day or whatever. It's about how and why this stuff affects our lives. And we've looked at relationships and happiness and health. And this week, I just want to look at the broader concept of performance, and really around sort of activity and performance, such as, in the workplace or on the athletics field or whatever. And as I was getting ready to do class, I came across this thing that I'd sort of vaguely knew about, but I'd forgotten about. And is that in 1948, there was a book published called Zen in the Art of Archery. It was written by a German philosopher. And I'd known about it, and I knew that it was sort of very influential. I've read quotes from it many different times and places, and there are lots of stories in it. And what I didn't really realize was that that book is credited of a couple of things. One is that book was so popular in the 1950s that it was really the book that sparked a massive interest in the broader topic of Zen. So by looking at how Zen was used in archery, that then stimulated a lot of interest in Zen, and then Zen teachers came over from Japan to the United States and to Europe. And that was a big part of how meditation ended up becoming the big thing it is today, was thanks to that book on archery, really. And that book also then, perhaps annoyingly, crafted literally hundreds of other books of Zen and the art of ... From motorcycle maintenance to creative writing to cooking to Zen and the art of whatever. But that book is not the only book. There have been many books since then that focus on this aspect of how the mind and performance are inextricably linked, and what is the best approach to dealing with your mind when it comes to performing at your very best. And I've read a few of them. But it wasn't actually a book that first introduced me to this aspect of the mind and performance. And that's where it's the segue to my somewhat embarrassing story. Was a long time ago. I was at university. I had recently started dating somebody, and we were passionate about each other in that way that when you're in your 20s, you can't keep your hands off each other. And every opportunity we were making out, and sure enough, even after lunch one day, relatively early on, we're making out just before going back to class. And she suddenly stops and says, "Have you read the Rachel Papers?" Now, the Rachel Papers was a book that had come out a couple of years beforehand. It was very popular in the UK at the time, written by a guy called Martin Amis, and I had not read it. So I stopped and said, "No, I mean, I at this moment in time, I wasn't really hoping that we would move into a conversation about English literature, but nevertheless, she'd asked the question, so I was sort of, why do you ask? And she sort of said, oh, no reason, just wondering. Needless to say, I was kind of intrigued, somewhat annoyed. So I went out almost immediately and bought the book and read it. And it's a coming of age story about a young guy in his late teens, early 20s, I forget, and his early experiences of trying to date this girl, Rachel. And in the book, Martin Amis, it's all written very much from the first person, and it feels very autobiographical, although I don't know if it is. But it's written very much in the first person inside the mind of this, teenage boy or early 20s boy. And he recounts in enormous detail this moment when he's making out with Rachel, and he's explaining exactly what he's doing, all his little techniques, what he's doing with his hands, what he's doing with his breath, what he's doing with his tongue. And inside his mind, it reveals like how much he's thinking about it. He's got this technique and he knows how to do this, and then he does that, and then he does the other thing, and he watches to see how her breathing changes. And it's this insight into this guy's mind. And at the time, I was just horrified reading it, not because it was explicit or anything like that. Of course, I was in my 20s. I thought it was brilliant. But I was horrified because Martin Amis was showing everybody in the world, including women, what was going on inside men's minds. This is terrible. This cannot be allowed to stand. How has he been allowed to publish this book? And then, of course, I was even more mortified because I realized that my girlfriend had known exactly what was going through my mind, that I was doing my routines, my little techniques, all the things that I thought was so clever. Like I do this, and then I do that, and then I do the other thing, and then I do this. And she realized that I wasn't actually with her. I was in my head. It was in my mind. And so then I asked her about it, and I was like, why'd you say that and everything else? And yes, it's true. And I fessed up that is exactly what I've been doing. And my defense was, well, I was trying to do my best. And she's like, yeah, I appreciate that, but much rather that you're actually natural and present and in the moment and with me, not in your head. She said she didn't want me to be like that guy in the book, and she didn't want to be like the girl in the book. So, turns out being in your head is this extremely tempting place to go because we think we're so clever. We think this part of our mind is what controls the show. And what most of these books on performance in sports and in the workplace, what most of them say about the mind is that your mind is a fantastic thing. And we've, of course, been saying this for many weeks now. The mind is amazing. But it's also extremely limited and in some ways deeply flawed. And meditation, this is largely what we're doing in the beginning, is just becoming familiar with how our mind works. And one of the things that the sports writers like Timothy Galway in The Inner Game of Tennis, one of the things he points out is that your mind, while brilliant, great at solving problems, great at deciding what you want to have for lunch, or working out what you want to do for your life, or how to raise kids, or how to have a job, friends, relationships, all this kind of stuff that it's very good at. It really is. It's very good. It's pretty amazing. But there are thousands and thousands of things where it is terrible and needs to just get out of the way. One of them is in the physical actions of your body. So, for example, when you go to stand up, there are literally hundreds of muscles involved. And they all have to work in unison at exactly the right time. In the meanwhile, at the same time, your brain is processing all these aspects of balance and which muscles need to fire a little bit more in order to keep you upright and stop you from falling over. And there are hundreds and hundreds of things going on just to get you to stand up. Let alone run, let alone catch a ball, hit a tennis ball, hit a golf ball, any of these physical actions. This part of the mind, this piece of our brain where we think and we process and we analyze and we problem solve and we worry, this has no role to play. If this had to get involved in you standing up, it would take hours and you'd fall over a lot. There's another part of your mind Timothy Galway refers to sort of self one and self two. Self one is the part of us that analyzes and worries and thinks. Self two is the self behind that, the really, really smart, quiet self that operates in the background. When it comes to throwing a tennis ball up in the air in order to serve it, pulling the racket back and hitting it, the best thing you can possibly do is, of course, do loads of training, learn how to do it, analyze it, study it, get lessons, find out what you're doing wrong, improve it, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes time to actually hit the ball, this part of the brain should not get involved. It's the dumbest part of your mind when it comes to something like that. It needs to get out of the way and let your body and your unconscious mind take over. You need to get your mind out of the way. And in meditation, one of the things we're doing is we're starting to see our mind. We put our attention on the breath. And then we see what happens next. And the mind kicks in and it goes, oh, am I doing this right? I don't know if I'm doing this right. Is this as good as the last meditation? I did a really good meditation last week. And the mind kicks in and we go, oh, got to remember, back to the breathing. And we come back. And the mind is like, did I remember to turn the kettle off or whatever? It goes somewhere else. And we notice that and we bring it back. And when we bring it back, and even if it's just for a moment, in that moment where we just become fully absorbed in our breathing and we let this part, this rabbiting mind part, when we let that rest, we're just touching in to that level of consciousness where this is not in control. We're just existing in the present moment, just aware of the present moment. There's a story about, you can look it up on YouTube, 1998 NBA Finals. Game 6. It was in Utah. And the Chicago Bulls were leading the finals 3-2. And it was an incredibly close game. And if the Utah Jazz won the game, it was going back to Chicago. 1990s, I was not a Chicago Bulls fan. I was not a Michael Jordan fan. I was living in New York City and I'd become a bit of a Knicks fan. And the Knicks had a fantastic team with the awesome Patrick Ewing and this wonderful set of players around him, Charles Oakley and Starks and all these great players. And year after year, Michael Jordan would break our hearts. So I really didn't like the Bulls. And I'm watching this game, 1998, Game 6, and really close game. And Karl Malone and John Stockton and the Utah Jazz are playing fantastic. And with 18 seconds to go, the Jazz are leading by 1 point. And they have the ball. And I'm thinking, and everybody's thinking, okay, this is going back to Chicago. It's going to go back to Chicago for Game 7. And then you can look it up, just the last 18 seconds of that Game 6, 1998. And Michael Jordan, of all of the extraordinary things, this is probably the most extraordinary thing, and it's the last thing he ever did for the Chicago Bulls. It was the last game he played for the Chicago Bulls. Insofar as somehow, up against one of the greatest players of all time, in Karl Malone, he manages to strip the ball, goes down the court, fakes that he's going to go inside, takes the step back, lands the jumper, 5 seconds left, Chicago Bulls win by 1. And the place goes nuts, and it means they've won yet another title, etc., etc., etc. And I just remember watching it and being mesmerized by it, along with, whatever it was, 76 million other people watching it at the time. That while not a Jordan fan, there was something extraordinary about it. And when he was asked about it afterwards, he said, well, it was that Zen Buddhism thing, which I have roughly the quote. Here we go. He says, that's what we've been trying to do. He was talking about the Bulls and their training. This is part of that Zen Buddhism stuff. Once you get into the moment, you know when you are there. Things start to move slowly. You start to see the court very well. You start reading what the defense is trying to do. I saw that moment. So the Chicago Bulls had hired a guy called George Mumford to start to teach them meditation. Phil Jackson, the coach, was a big Zen Buddhism fan, and he just thought it would be very helpful for them. And George Mumford had some history well, he'd played college basketball, but through injuries, he hadn't been able to progress. But he was good friends with people like Julius Erving. So he knew the game and he knew the players. And so he came in and taught them meditation. And this is what he was trying to teach them, was that if you want to be as good as you possibly can in the moment, in that moment, you cannot be thinking about glory, fame, money, success, how everybody's going to love you, popularity. Nor can you be thinking about the opposite of failure, about what happens if I miss, how will I feel, people won't like me anymore, I might not get the big contract. You cannot be thinking about anything. To perform at your very, very best, you can't be thinking about anything except being present with only what's going on right now. And that is the training. That is the training of meditation. Is right now, this moment for you right now, what's going through your mind? Can you feel your breathing? Are you aware of what's around the room in front of you? What colors you can see? What sensations you can feel in your body? And in that moment, 1998, after masses of training and goodness knows, like incredible amounts of talent and practice and everything else, but in that moment, Michael Jordan was just present. He knew exactly what was going to happen next. And it's a state that athletes refer to as being in the zone. And it doesn't, even for somebody like Michael Jordan, it doesn't happen terribly often. But there is this moment when all of a sudden your full focus is only in the present and you stop worrying about your technique. You're not thinking about anything. You're not really worrying anything about anything. You're just aware of this moment. I hope I'm not going to bore you with too much sports, but there's another athlete, another basketball player actually, Bill Russell, who played for the Celtics, who I think described this zone state the best I've read in his autobiography. He says, every so often, a Celtics game would heat up so that it became more than a physical or even mental game and would become magical. When it happened, I could feel my play rise to a new level. It would surround not only me and the other team, but even the referees. At that special level, all sorts of odd things happen. The game would be in the white heat of competition, and yet somehow I wouldn't feel competitive, which is a miracle in itself. I'd be putting out maximum effort, straining, coughing up parts of my lungs as we ran, and yet I never felt that pain. The game would move so quickly that every fake, cut, and pass would be surprising, and yet nothing could surprise me. It was almost as if we were playing in slow motion. During those spells, I could almost sense how the next play would develop, where the next shot would be taken. Even before the other team brought the ball inbounds, I could feel it so keenly that I'd want to shout to my teammates, "It's coming there!" Except that I knew everything would change if I did. My premonitions would be consistently correct, and I always felt then that I not only knew all the Celtics by heart, but also all the opposing players, and they all knew me. There have been many times in my career where I felt moved or joyful, but these were the moments when I had chills pulsing up and down my spine. On the 5 or 10 occasions when the game ended at that special level, I literally did not care who had won. If we lost, I'd still be as free and high as a skyhawk. So this zone thing, being in the zone. Okay, so maybe you're not a professional athlete. Who cares about the zone? But it's relevant for all of our life. All of our life, we have this opportunity to be in that state of being fully present in the moment. And I think I sort of had this belief that my mind, this is so clever and it's so smart and I need to control things and I need to sort it all out and have all the answers. And it turns out that there is a time for training. There is a time for thinking and analyzing and worrying and working it all out. But then in the moment, you just have to perform and you just have to be as fully present as you can, whether it's on the sports field or whether it's with your kids, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a conversation, whether it's in a presentation. Like today, I've been stressing and worrying about this talk a lot and done a lot of research and a lot of different ways of talking about this and presenting it and everything else. But then when the camera comes on or when the countdown gets to 0, I have to try, and I'm not always successful, but I have to try and forget all that. Just be present, hopefully, with you. And that's true of our lives. It's true of every type of performance. Getting in this state, also known as flow. So in the 1980s, there was a psychologist by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he wrote this big best-selling book called Flow, and he described flow as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. So there's this aspect of just being in the moment, of not letting this mind thing that thinks it's so clever, but actually it needs to get out of the way, because your second mind, your second self, that mind behind the mind, your self behind the mind, that's your really smart self. That's your best self. I know this is clever. It's very clever. And hopefully it does a good job when it needs to, but there's a time for getting it out of the way. And that's true on the sports field. It's true in the boardroom. It's true in the bedroom. But it's also true just in your life, in every moment of your life, that there is this aspect of being fully present. And that's what we learn in meditation, is seeing this thing, seeing the really clever thing and saying, okay, thank you for your contribution, but right now I'm going to meditate. And then it kicks in again. We go, oh yeah, look, the mind again. Okay. And then we, at least for a moment, even if it's just for a moment, a few times in a meditation, we touch into that just being in the moment. So let's give this a go. So let's do the second meditation. Invite you once again to take your seat, sitting so you're comfortable but not too comfortable. And take a nice deep breath in. And let it all the way out, completely emptying your lungs. Once again, nice deep breath in. This time letting it out very slowly. And when you get to the bottom of that breath in your own time, just do that one more time, taking a nice full deep breath in. And then letting it out very slowly and just releasing any tension you're holding in your body. And when you get to the bottom of that breath, just noticing your mind, this first mind, this thinking mind, noticing what it's doing, what it's thinking about, what it's worrying about. It's thinking about what I just said, or thinking about the meditation, or thinking about something else in your life. Noticing that that's your first mind. Seeing if you can just let that go, and one of the ways of doing that is to become very focused on something that's going on in the present moment, like your breathing. Placing your attention there instead of listening to the jibber-jabber of your mind. Noticing the sensation of the air as it comes in and goes out. I invite you to be aware of your breathing, but also opening your awareness up to notice your body. Hundreds of little sensations that your body is sending you. There's your breathing, there's your body. You can notice any sounds in your room around you. Maybe some obvious ones. See if you can notice some subtle ones. It's like the sound of a refrigerator or a fan. And we're not trying to name the sounds or identify them, or when a car goes past, or just see if you can sit in this state of pure awareness, allowing all the sensations from your breathing, your body, anything you can hear, allowing this flow of sensations and just being in that flow from moment to moment, letting go of each sensation as it passes, opening up to each new sensation as it arises. Resting in the present moment. And of course, again, from time to time your mind will kick in, and that's fine, but just come back to the moment. Maybe start with your breathing. Open up to your body. Open up to sounds you can hear in the room. Resting in pure awareness of this moment in its entirety. We'll do this one for about 10 minutes as well. about halfway. Just reminding you to be very gentle with yourself. When you notice your mind is taking you elsewhere, it's normal. It's part of the process. It can be very persistent. But so can you, just being persistent in noticing it, very gently letting it go, returning your attention to your full awareness of everything that's going on in this moment, over and over. invite you to take a deep breath in. Let it all the way out. And in your own time, when you're ready, open your eyes, connect yourself back into the room. So there's this aspect of meditation and getting us in the present moment, becoming it helps if I turn the sound on. Yes. Okay, so maybe now I'm back. Okay. Sorry, forgot to turn the sound on now that I was rebooted. Is that working? Yes, that works. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now I'm trying to stay present. So, meditation does help with the present moment, but it's not the only way in which it helps performance. And today I was on CNBC and happened to notice that Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence, had a piece today about the 12 competencies, the 4 domains and 12 competencies of emotional intelligence. And that's the slide I put up. So you may or may not be able to read that, but the 4 domains he's got are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And then underneath that, he breaks that down into these 12 competencies. Of the 12 competencies, there are 6. So of the 12, half of them, the only training you can do to improve is meditation. And when, so there was at Google, there was an engineer at Google, one of the first employees. I think he was like 107 or something like that. Chade-Meng Tang was his name. And he really got into meditation, and he's Buddhist. He trains with the Dalai Lama, and he's very serious about it all. And he went to Google and sort of said, listen, you always invite us to try and do these other things that we're passionate about. Let me just see. Sorry, yeah, the microphone's wrong. But anyway, it seems to be working more or less. So anyway, Chade-Meng Tang at Google. He, hold on one second. I'm just going to try and fix this. Sorry. I'm still here. I'm just fixing the sound. Okay, I think that should be better. Yeah. Okay. So, just telling a story about Google and how they started meditating, how they introduced a meditation program. So there's this engineer, Chade Tang, and he went to Google and he said, hey, I'm passionate about this meditation thing, and I think it would be really beneficial for everybody at Google to do this meditation thing, and I'd like to generate it and do it. And they said, hey, knock yourself out. Looks like that finally has fixed itself. Okay, so Chade Tang gets the go-ahead, and he puts up all these posters and he sort of says, oh, I'm going to teach you all how to meditate. Now, no surprise, nobody at Google was interested in meditation. I mean, this is before meditation became hip and cool and everything else. I'm not saying it is hip and cool, but it's hipper and cooler than it used to be. Anyway, so at Google, he tried to get everybody to meditate, and nobody wanted to meditate. And then somebody he was working with said, well, you know, you've got a lot of engineers here, a lot of computer programmers, and the one thing they don't know anything about, or the one thing that they're, somewhat stereotypically, but one thing they're generally not very good at is anything to do with emotional intelligence. They're extremely intelligent, but not emotionally. So why don't you put on a lecture about emotional intelligence? Because people will come. And Chade Tang was like, well, why would I do that? And the lady who was working with him said, well, because the only way you really improve emotional intelligence is through meditation. So anyway, so that's what they did. So they put on this talk. They actually got Daniel Goleman to go and give the talk on emotional intelligence, and the room was packed. And then Daniel Goleman, at the end of this long talk about emotional intelligence and these 4 competencies and 4 domains and 12 competencies and all this other stuff. And then somebody sort of says, well, this is great. It's great to know this stuff. How can we improve our emotional intelligence? And the only answer is meditate. Now, since then, the meditation program at Google has done very well, and lots of people sign up for it. And now emotional intelligence, a lot more studies have been done on it. It does seem to be this very interesting aspect that these competencies are the key competencies of leadership and performance in the workplace. And this is how people are effective. It's not the only way. You can just be a solitary genius. But generally in large organizations, emotional intelligence is one of the most important things that you can develop. And the only way to develop it is meditation. So I'm back. The video's back. I think the sound is back. Sound working again. Yes. Sorry about that. Computer just crashed. Went completely black. Said, sorry, we've got a problem. But it's back. Anyway. So the 3 aspects of how meditation helps improve performance. One is being that whole moment-to-moment presence. Second piece is that it develops this emotional intelligence, which helps certainly in the workplace, but also helps in our lives as well. And then I'd like to share this third part, which I find completely surprising, totally counterintuitive. And yet I think in my personal experience, I mean, the research, but also in my experience, actually does work. And that is that there are sort of 2 possibilities in competition. There's a line at the beginning of Conan the Barbarian. Conan is asked, what is great in life? And Arnold Schwarzenegger, playing Conan, says something like, to crush your enemies, drive them before you, and to hear the screaming and lamentation of the women. And so that's one approach to competition. You just crush them. You're just better, bigger, prove that you've got more testosterone or something. You beat down your enemy so that you're better than they are. And you hope they fail and you try and destroy them. And I think that was pretty much my approach to competition most of my life. And I think it's quite a lot of people's approach. It's like you want to win and you want the other side to lose. So if you're playing in a match, let's say you're playing against somebody, you want them to lose. You want them to mess up. You want them to not do very well. Well, I was slightly surprised to discover that this coach, George Mumford, who taught the Chicago Bulls and then the LA Lakers and then the Knicks and lots of athletes around the world, has taught them about meditation. One of the things he teaches them is also loving kindness. And I think loving kindness is fantastic. It's a very powerful, very important thing. But I was like, well, why are you teaching the Chicago Bulls about loving kindness? How does that improve their basketball? And it turns out it's quite interesting, is that there are a couple of aspects about it. One is that your mind always has a couple of places to go. It can go into the destruction of your enemy and like hating them and wishing they fail and resenting them and all that kind of stuff. That's a huge expenditure of energy. Wanting them to fail costs you an enormous amount of energy, and it's just not a very helpful thing, especially at the highest level. The difference between the person who wins and loses often comes down to the last few points of a match when it's very finely balanced. And in that, it's very much who still has a little bit of juice left in the tank. And if you've been wasting your juice, like wanting them to fail, hoping they miss, it doesn't help you. The other thing about hoping that they miss is that it's going to screw you both ways. Like, let's just say hypothetically, you want them to miss. Well, if they do miss, okay, yeah, sure, you're happy that they missed. But it didn't help, it didn't make them miss. But here's the alternative, is you're hoping that they miss, and then they make the shot. They hit the goal, they make the point, whatever it is, whatever your sport you're playing, whatever competition you're in. If they're successful and you are hoping for them to fail, now is the moment when you need to be able to bring everything to the moment because they've just done something good. And yet you are hoping they would fail. So now, A, they've just done something good, and B, you're really disappointed. So you're disappointed, now you're more on the spot. So you've wasted energy and you're up against it now if they've been successful. So he teaches them loving kindness, and he doesn't necessarily call it loving kindness. He just puts it in a slightly more vernacular of, basketball players. He just says, don't be hating. Don't be hating. And what he encourages is that through loving kindness, you actually wish your opponent well. You want your opponent to do as well as your opponent can possibly do. Then if your opponent is playing really well, here's this thing, is you have this positive uplift. You feel better about the fact that your opponent is playing great. You need that positive affect to bring your best game. So when your opponent's playing really well, instead of being disappointed, you're thrilled. You're in the thick of it. Your opponent is going to stretch you to your limit. Now, you might win, you might lose. Wishing for the other person to lose is not going to help you in one way or another, any possible way. It's only going to hurt you. It's going to hurt you with the energy you expend. And then if they play really well, it's going to disappoint you and you won't bring your best to the moment. And if they win, you're now pissed. You're unhappy. Your only happiness is in victory, which doesn't happen all the time. The other approach is one of loving kindness, whereby you don't waste your energy, you wish your opponent well, and you thrive on your opponent doing well, and you try and help them. Now, there's a couple of things about this. One is, it actually turns out teams win more. They're not wasting energy worrying about whether the other team is going to lose or not, or wasting energy with hate or dislike or bad-mouthing them or anything like that. It's a big waste of time and energy. It turns out, instead of that, they wish them well, brings up their game, and they play as well as they can. So they end up playing better. But here's the real kicker. What I've noticed is, I do think it helps. I do think you play better and you get better results. But the other aspect of this is that you just like life more. You're in the competition. As Bill Russell says, in those moments when he was absolutely in the zone, he, one of the most competitive people, didn't mind whether he won or lost. So there you go. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. That's inevitable. If you're only happy when you win, okay, you'll be happy sometimes. What if you're happy if you win or you lose? And here's the thing, is I always thought that mindset would mean you'd lose more. You'll actually win more. But in addition to that, you'll actually be happy a lot more. So it turns out, yes, this present moment awareness, very important for being in the zone, for performing at your best. Meditation generally, incredibly important for emotional intelligence. And then weirdly, in my opinion, loving kindness, fantastic for performance as well. So let's finish tonight with a loving kindness meditation. So if I can invite you all to take your seat, And hopefully the computer won't crash this time. So sitting such that you're comfortable, but not too comfortable. And take a deep breath in. And let it all the way out. Once again, nice deep breath in. This time letting it out very slowly. Just allowing your body to relax as you breathe out. Then allow your breathing to return to normal. Just allowing everything else to fall away. Now I'd like you to bring to mind the person that it's easiest for you to send love to. Just opening your heart as wide as you can. Allowing yourself to really use this incredible capacity you have for kindness, generosity, and love. Seeing this person in your mind's eye. Just starting to repeat your phrases, whatever language you choose. Tonight, my phrases will be, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. Opening your heart as wide as you can. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. For the second part, we're just seeing if we can send that same degree of kindness, generosity, and love towards ourselves. This is often difficult, just seeing how much you can. Even if you have resistance now, don't think you'll always have resistance. Just take yourself to the edge of what you can send yourself. And at the very least, just repeating your phrases. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with joy. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with joy. If you find this difficult, you're not alone. But over time, your resistance to this may soften. Well, it will soften. So just be very gentle with yourself. Send yourself as much kindness as you can. And at the very least, just keep repeating the phrases. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with joy. And for the third part of the exercise, try and send all our generosity to what's known as the neutral person. Somebody that's in your life but you don't know them very well. Like a neighbor or UPS guy or somebody at the post office or the supermarket. You don't know them, but you know that they struggle just like you do. They have hopes and dreams and fears and frustrations. They experience sadness and loss just like you. Just opening your heart as much as you can to them, practicing this incredible capacity you have. Repeating your phrases, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. The fourth part of the exercise, bringing to mind what's known as the difficult person. Just stretching ourselves a little bit. Finding somebody that we find somewhat irritating or annoying. We're not necessarily going at this stage for people we hate. Just stretching ourselves a little bit. Picturing this person and recognizing that this is not to excuse them or forgive them. It's really for us to find our edge where we hold back, and to just play with that edge a little bit and see if we can stretch it a little bit. Because they make mistakes. They're flawed. Just like we are. At the very least, see if you can send them as much as you can and just keep repeating your phrases with them in your mind. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with joy. And for the last part of the exercise, we're going to expand our heart and start to realize its extraordinary capacity, that it's way bigger than we probably realize. Bringing to mind all beings, billions of people, trillions of animals, and not trying to overthink the impossibility of what we're asking for, merely opening our heart to wish it, to be courageous, to wish for something we know is impossible, but to wish it anyway and powerfully. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with joy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with joy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with joy. And as we come to the end of this meditation, just encouraging you to transition out of this very gently, reconnecting into your body by noticing your breathing, noticing the physical sensations of your body. Just wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes. Just encourage you to try and transition out of this back into the rest of your evening gently and slowly, so that you can maybe carry some of this into the rest of your evening and maybe even into the rest of your week. One more deep breath in and let it out. And when you're ready, open your eyes and connect yourself back into your room. So week 11 down. Thank you very much for joining on this journey, putting up with some of the technical difficulties which still keep happening. Last thought for the day is really just this meditation and performance thing. I find it fascinating, this when athletes are describing this aspect of the zone, being in the zone, where they're fully present in the moment, and it's as if reality, time stops or it disappears. There's no thought of self, there's no thought of the other, there's a feeling of tremendous connection. It's very similar to the way the mystics have talked about transcendent experiences and spiritual experiences. And so that's what we'll be talking about next week. Be looking at this for the last week. We'll be just looking at this aspect that, although I like to talk about meditation as being a practical, secular, important practice for real life, and I think it is, it did originate as a spiritual practice. So we will, at least just in the last week, look at why. What is it that these mystics and other contemplative traditions have looked at in meditation? What are they touching into? And why is meditation such a key part of it? So I hope you'll be able to join me for the last week, next week. And if you can, we'll still be doing the morning meditations every morning, 8:30 live. Or they'll still be on YouTube later in the day, if there weren't any technical difficulties. In the meantime, thank you all so much. May your week be filled with happiness. May your week be filled with healthiness. May your week be filled with joy. Thanks.